And we're rolling. We're live. How are you doing today, Julie?
I am great. Thank you so much. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. I'm excited to talk to you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
It's such an honor and a privilege.
I wasn't sure if you would accept it. I mean, because you're a judge, it's kind of like one of those intimidating things. Like, typically when we think of a judge, we think of somebody who is in robes, and we think of somebody who takes authority when they walk into a room. So it's a little bit intimidating.
Yeah. That's exactly the reason why I love that you invited me. Because I am still a person.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody has a job that they do. My job is a little bit different than a lot of other people's. And sometimes the mystery of it or the stereotypes or the persona doesn't really match up to how it is.
Yeah.
And one of my goals is to break those stereotypes of what is a judge, what are judges like. Sometimes even in the courtroom, I'll get done talking to somebody and they'll just like spontaneously yell out something like, you don't sound like a judge, or you don't seem like an average judge, or you're not what I thought a judge would be like, or something. And then they kind of like step back and like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that because it just came out like spontaneously.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, that's actually wonderful. I appreciate knowing, what your thoughts and feelings are. In district court, a lot of times it's the first time that people come to court.
Yeah.
It's super important to me to change the perception and the persona of what coming to court is like and how you're going to be treated and how I am going to be perceived as a judge. So
That's one thing. I just released an episode today with Nick Ladorf.
okay.
And in that episode, him and I talked about like when you go to court. He was saying that going to court's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
He's a lawyer, and so he's had to go several times. But he was saying that the whole dynamic between judges and like the people who are in court, like it's almost like this power thing, and it sets the people apart. It's a weird dynamic, and so I guess that's kind of important that you take the time to be more personable and put yourself on a personal level with the people who come into your courtroom. Now, what kind of court hearings or what kind of things do you typically rule over?
Well, in district court, the easiest way to explain it is that everything starts there. So, for example, if somebody came in to get arraigned on a crime, it would start with that. So we would do the arraignment where you explain, what are you charged with? What are the maximum possible consequences? How do you want to plead to that? Let's set up some court dates. Let's determine your bond. Let's determine the bond conditions. Let's get you your paperwork. Let's get you started on, stuff that you're going to be probably asked to do as part of your bond. So it starts from the very beginning in a criminal process with arraignments. Then for misdemeanors, I would hear a case from the first second all the way to the end, whether that was in a plea and then a sentence, whether it ended up going to a jury trial. So we do jury trials on misdemeanors in district court. And then for felony cases, which is anything that a person could receive more than 1 year in jail for, it still starts in district court where we do the arraignment, the bond, set the court date, the status conference, determine if they're going to have a preliminary exam, evidentiary hearing, determine if there's enough evidence for the case to go to trial or to be bound over to circuit court. So it's kind of that gatekeeper role right then. And so if a person waives the exam, then the case continues to circuit court for ultimate disposition on a felony. If they have the exam, the evidentiary hearing, witnesses, evidence, testimony comes in. It's kind of like a mini trial where my role is to determine, is there probable cause to determine that there's enough evidence for the case to continue to trial. If not, the case could be dismissed then, or the charges could be reduced. And if there is, then it would be bound over to circuit court. So, and then civil cases, the same thing, like everything starts in district court. So I have small claims. I have general civil cases. I have landlord-tenant cases.
Oh, boy. Do you do anything with can't think of the
like family law or probate.
Yeah,
No.
probate.
I was just thinking as I was going through stuff, like it might be easier to say what doesn't come, like do an opposite list. What doesn't come in district court, or what don't I hear?
Okay.
So in district court, we don't have any family law matters. That's a circuit court.
Okay.
And we don't have any probate court matters. That goes in front of a probate court judge. The probate judge only hears probate matters.
Okay.
Guardianship, conservatorships, things of that nature. So,
okay, I was just curious because I would assume that having that come into your courtroom, that would be difficult to make certain decisions. I feel like it'd just be difficult. It would be difficult. Like I recently, within the last few years, had to go to probate court because I found out that I had a son and that I didn't really know about, and found out about it later through the mom giving a DNA test. Or not the mom, the grandma. She agreed to do a DNA test behind the mom's back.
Okay.
And so when I found out that I was 99.999% the father, I decided to hire a lawyer and then go to court. And it was through Eaton County.
Okay.
And the judge didn't rule in my favor. And because there's a law, right? Like 3 years or something. You have up to 3 years to find out if the child's yours and establish paternity rights.
I'm not sure what the time frame is to establish, but I do know there's like a presumption of parentage that happens over a period of time. Like if another person steps in the role of the parent.
Yeah, and that was the case.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, there was another father figure, and he had been established from birth.
Okay.
But he wasn't the father. So
I think especially with family law cases in that scenario even, it's very fact specific.
And what do you mean?
I mean, like what you're saying, because there was somebody else that stepped into the role as the father from the beginning, maybe even did things, as a father legally. Like, did he sign the birth certificate?
He did.
Yeah. So everything is so fact specific in that regard. Like a lot of cases.
Yeah.
That you wonder, sometimes that may not apply.
Well,
presumptive parentage, but
and I mean the thing is like it would end up uprooting the whole child's life, right? Like up to that point, that the child knew the other guy as the dad, and so to eliminate somebody's parental rights and then establish another father, that I couldn't even imagine what that would do to a child.
Yeah, that's probably not a very common thing, I would think.
No, I don't think so.
In a very unique situation, and that you could imagine. As a judge, you can imagine that sometimes the decisions are difficult to make.
Yeah. Do you have weight on your shoulders when you have to sentence somebody to a certain amount of time, or like knowing that maybe a young person committed this crime and they came into your courtroom and then now they have to serve time in prison or jail, and it's going to affect their youth and possibly the rest of their life?
Yes. Yeah. To say I don't think about cases and people afterwards would be so untrue, because, I mean, I was a practicing attorney for 14 years before I decided to run for judge. And there were cases that I still remember to this day, and people I still remember, people I still wonder how they're doing. And some people have done really well and some people have not in their future. And there are always those cases and people that affect you, and they still do now as a judge. Or I think even there are times where I see somebody in front of me and maybe they're not ready, frankly, to make some changes that they need to make in their life. And you wish that you could do something to help them understand what's going to happen in their future, or to help them understand why it's so important for them to try to make the changes. Yeah. But you can't control the people's behavior sometimes. Yeah. And especially I find a lot of times too, young men in particular, as a mom, I have 3 kids, and as a mom, it's hard not to look at a young man, especially in the early 20s, that they don't see the consequences of their behavior for their future. They don't see anything past what's happening right now. They don't see how this is going to affect maybe their ability to get financial aid to go to college. They don't see how it's going to affect their ability to get any type of a license, whether it's even a builder's license. Yeah. They don't see how it's going to affect things, 10, 15 years down the road.
Yeah.
They just don't see that right now. And it's so hard when they're not ready to make those changes, but you can see that for them.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by Red Bike Delivery. This delivery service operates only using battery-powered, eco-friendly transportation. Red Bike Delivery is there for all your delivery needs, whether it's dinner for the family, flowers for your partner, or new houseplants for your new collection. Red Bike Delivery will gladly deliver those and everything in between. So what are you waiting for? Check out Red Bike Delivery on Facebook or Instagram for more information. Red Bike Delivery, because there's only one Earth. Very difficult and frustrating, I could imagine, especially like if you see somebody come in more than once. I'm sure you've seen that multiple times, right?
Yeah. One of the great things I love about being in district court, it's like a people's court. And so it is more of an interesting dynamic where you get to know people in your community. Sometimes you get to know, like in civil cases, who the landlords are or who the civil attorneys are, or who the business owners are. But in criminal cases, you get to know people, their family, their dynamics. Sometimes you see certain members of the same family even.
Oh, man.
And sometimes you can see things progress worse, and sometimes you see people really honestly 100% turn their life around, and that is just the most amazing experience. Like, I've had the opportunity to be so blessed to see people change their life that just seeing one person do that really just reestablishes for me why it is that we do what we do, why it is that we have programs in place, why it is we allow people to do, probation or to enter treatment court programs. I run a treatment court program.
You do?
Yeah. And this is why we do it. And to see that, and then to see the person change before your eyes, it really is a blessing to even have that opportunity to see that and share that moment with the person.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the more exciting things about being a human is when you're able to help somebody or even like put them on the right course. Like what you're doing, I would assume a lot of people are like, man, screw that judge. Like they sentenced me to all this time or whatever, or I have to serve community service or go to do probation. But if you look at it in a different perspective, like it's putting you on the right path to make your life make your life better, essentially. If you look at it the right way. Otherwise, you're just looking at it as something that you have to do, and it's just another chore. But that's one of the beautiful things about being a human is when you're able to help somebody and help propel their life and make them a better person.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I feel you on that level because I do that with this podcast. It's different.
Yeah.
I'm not obviously I don't have that whole judge dynamic or anything, but having people share their stories helps them. And a lot of people that have been in court or have been addicted to drugs or went to jail for whatever, or even prison. I've had people who were in prison come on the podcast who have completely changed their lives, and to have them share their story, it helps them tremendously. And it helps me too, to hear their stories.
I think we could all learn from each other.
Absolutely.
And we all need to recognize that we have value regardless of what our experiences are. And at the end of the day, David, everybody just wants to be heard.
Yeah.
And I really just walk in every day with two philosophies. You're going to be heard and you're going to be respected. Regardless of what the outcome is, regardless of what my decision is, regardless if you're out in the public or if you're in jail, those two things have to be in place. Because if those are in place, even if you don't accept the decision at that moment, you will at some point. And I'm okay with people not agreeing with me. I'm okay with people being even upset with me. But I still have to have that bottom line ability to be respected, to be heard. And at some point, I think that helps them be able to understand why the decision was made, or that at least it was a fair decision, whether or not they're willing to accept it at that moment or not.
Right. Now, what is your opinion on people who were sentenced and got out on bond, but then they end up committing an even more egregious crime, like possible murder or whatever while out on bond.
I think that is such a risk to the community, frankly. And people ask me and have asked me since I've been a judge, what's the hardest part about being a judge? And I have to say, honestly, sometimes the hardest part is determining somebody's bond from the get-go.
Yeah.
Because somebody is charged with a crime, they're presumed innocent. You have court rules that you have to follow that say you have to set the bond with the presumption of innocence, and the only thing that you can consider in determining bond is the person's ability to appear at court and public safety. So you have to start with the presumption that they're to be given a PR bond, like just basically an amount of money, and if you don't show up, you owe that amount, and then there'll be a bench warrant. And if you feel like that's not sufficient, you can go to step 2, which is do a PR bond with some conditions. But the conditions can only be to affect public safety. Like, for example, I see people on a lot of drug charges, frankly. I think there's an uptick in, controlled substance use. And I've seen it increase. Like, I've seen more people being charged with possession, use, and delivery, manufacture of controlled substance over the last year than I have in the last 3 years.
Like meth and things
Especially
like that.
meth. Oh. Especially meth right now.
That's big in Eaton County, right?
I feel like it is. I feel like I've talked to other judges because I have a lot of judges that I stay in contact with in different counties, and especially Ingham County, because we're really close.
You're Eaton, right?
Yeah, I'm
okay.
Eaton.
Okay.
But we're divided by Waverly Road.
Right.
So, it kind of depends even where you're at. You could be Lansing, but you could be Eaton County. Trust me, people have come to court and be like, why am I even here? I live in Lansing. I'm like, I know, but it depends on what side you're on, what side of the mall are you on or whatnot. So, or literally what side of Waverly Road that you're on.
Right.
But we face a lot of the same issues. And, but I think it's been an increased issue for a lot of counties in talking to other judges and just staying in touch with other areas as well. But especially for Eaton County, I have personally noticed that there's been an increase. The frequency of people that are charged has really gone up. So say, for example, even if I use the possession of meth charge, that's a 10-year felony, right? So if you look at that and you're setting bond, you have to go with the presumption of innocence. Then you have to look at their ability to appear at court. Say it's their first charge ever in their life. So you don't have, and a lot of times for some reason, it seems like with controlled substances, they don't have a huge criminal history.
They just don't get caught.
You don't know. You don't know, right?
Right.
Or you don't know, like especially with meth, I think for some reason, and not to create any conclusions about, people that would use controlled substances, but it really does seem to run the gamut of young people, middle-aged people, professional people. Really? It kind of reminds me of how cocaine started in the 80s. Mm. Like now it's accessible in different ways. The cost.
Do you think it's because people are maybe down on their luck and they start making it to make some extra money, then they try it and then they
I don't think
hooked?
people are making it anymore. That's why I think it's changed. Like it first started was kind of like people were able to create it with different substances or components they could pick up. That's how meth first came to everybody's attention, or like, the one pot or things that people would do to make it. And now that's changed. It's being, created and distributed outside the U.S. And so it's mass produced. Yeah. It's in packets. It's cheap. It's like how cocaine started, where you could buy a small packet for $5, $20, and it's just exploding right now.
Yeah.
And it's extremely addictive. The components of that change, the makeup of how your brain comprehends things, and it just has a totally different, immediate, long-term effect.
I mean, we have a fentanyl crisis right now because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. So we got a little bit sidetracked on
We
that.
definitely did.
But it goes back to the whole bond issue of public safety. I consider, and I'll tell it to somebody, I'll tell them right to their face, I have public safety concerns, which includes safety to yourself.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do a condition that you can't use. You have to test, 3 times a week, put a bunch of conditions on there, and either you're going to be able to comply with those, and if not, you're going to come back in front of me on a bond violation, which then again, this is the frustrating part about the system. You have to be arraigned on that. You have to be told what the allegation is. You have to be given the opportunity to plead guilty or not guilty. And if you plead not guilty, we have to have a hearing. And I can't really do anything until it's substantiated or not. And then at that point, you can make a decision about bond. So I guess to go back to your question, if somebody's on, you make the best decision you can for bond, just seeing that person for the first time, given what you have in front of you and the court rules, because you have to have a justification for your bond.
Right. Now, what if it was like a domestic abuse situation, or like, how do you figure out what the bond is for that? Because wouldn't that be like a public safety concern?
Yes. Yeah. And so usually for a domestic violence or any kind of assaultive charge, especially if it's a felony charge, where domestic violence is a 93-day misdemeanor, assault and battery is a 93-day misdemeanor, but other assaultive offenses like assault with a dangerous weapon, assault GBH, those are, felony charges. So you look at the charge. I look at the person's criminal history, because if it's an assaultive crime, I have our sheriff's department run the person's criminal history, and that history is a different history than like somebody could get if you were just doing a background check. So I can see everything on there. I can see if you've had any contact with police your entire life.
Whoa.
I could see if you got charged but it got dismissed later, or if you got charged and you completed a diversion program. It's still going to be on there for me to see.
Oh.
But it wouldn't be a public record. So I can look at it.
So would that be something that would be held against you? Or
it's just one of the factors you have to take into account in determining public safety, or your ability to appear, because sometimes it will have on there, that they have a warrant out from to a different county,
right,
or they have charges out where they failed to appear before, so you could take that into account.
Gotcha.
But I always do a no contact order, so they can't have any contact with the alleged victim.
Does that work?
While the case is pending? A lot of times it does, frankly.
Does it?
A lot of times. There's more compliance than less compliance. It's just that we hear about the cases where the person doesn't comply.
Right.
We don't hear about all the hundreds and thousands of cases where people are complying. But in a lot of people, I find too, the biggest issue sometimes with the no contact is that there's so many other collateral consequences, like they have children, right?
Yeah.
And so the first question is, well, how do I see my children? And I have the hard and difficult task of saying, that's not for me to consider today. My only thing to consider is you're charged with this crime and the alleged victim is this person. You can't have contact with that person, period, for any reason, no exceptions.
Yeah.
And it stays in place until the case is over. And sometimes right now, especially in the last year or two, the cases are backlogged. So what if it takes your case a year, which is not uncommon? At one time, I had my trial docket that was out months. Like right now, if you wanted a trial, your first available date is going to be end of October, 1st of November.
Holy cow.
And just recently...
So you could sit in jail that long?
You could sit in jail that long. Some people have sat in jail longer than the maximum possible consequence for the offense.
Wow. So, and that counts as time served?
Yeah. But you don't get extra credit. Or like people say, do you get reimbursed for that? There's no reimbursement in the court system.
Oh my gosh.
Like that's just time.
Wow.
Or if you're found not guilty.
Yeah. What is your opinion on people who were charged with, like, let's say marijuana, and now it's legal? When you see something like that, it's legal. What is your opinion on those who are still in jail or prison because of it, because of those drug charges?
I don't know about how to answer if they're in prison, because I think that our state appellate division, SATO, is addressing those issues. And if that's the only thing that they're in prison for, then I think they're able to file appeals for that. But as far as in district court, when the law changed, I asked our probation department to pull all the files where the person was only on probation for possession of marijuana, not anything else. And that's actually pretty rare, you know, because usually there's a couple other things that maybe the person's charged with.
Right.
So there was really surprisingly less than 7 or 8 people. I can't remember the exact amount, but definitely less than 10 people.
Wow.
And so then I looked at each case individually because I really feel like it's dangerous to make any hard and fast rules about anything.
Yeah.
Because then you're not taking into account individual facts, circumstances, people, history, all kinds of stuff. So I looked at each case individually. If the person had completed, you know, over 50% of their probation, never had any issues, that was the only issue, and there was no reason to keep them on probation, there weren't any other terms that they had to satisfy, then I'd be like, we need to discharge them because the law has told us that we need to do that, basically. But if I looked at their file and maybe, for example, they were ordered to complete their GED and they hadn't done that, then I would let the probation officer know. I'm not going to discharge the person, but the next time they report to you, you can tell them, look, you still have these other conditions you have to comply with. And so when you get those done, we can look at it again.
That's fair enough. That's fair.
Yeah.
So let's kind of talk about you a little bit and less about the courtroom. I feel like that's a daunting subject.
It is. It's one of those conversations, like, I could literally talk about it for hours.
I'm sure you could.
I'm sure a lot of people don't find it as interesting, but it's just so much to it.
Well, I'm sure you're passionate about it. I mean, you do it for a living. Now, I would assume that if you're doing it for a living, especially something like that, you have to be passionate about helping people and law and all kinds of different things. But when did this passion come about? When did you start practicing law? Where did you go to school? And then when did you decide to become a judge or even run for being judge?
Well, I went to school in Eaton Rapids.
Oh.
I grew up on a farm.
Oh.
I was a farm girl, went to school in Eaton Rapids, and then later on in life, I moved to the big city of Charlotte. But after I graduated from high school, I first wanted to actually be a police officer.
Oh, okay.
And so I went to Ferris State because they at the time had the program where you could do your Malazzi certification and get your degree at the same time. So I went to Ferris State, and after I was there for a year, I wasn't really quite sure that that's what I wanted to do. And my dad was extremely strict, like over the top strict. Like I was the oldest of 5 kids and the girl. So he had, I would consider what I like to say favorably, like tough love, you know. And so he had these guidelines, like if you're going to be in school, you're going to do A, B, C, and D, period. And that's it. There's like no exceptions. So when I came home for the first summer, my dad was like, you know, I'm not 100,000% satisfied with your grades, and you need to really decide if you want to, this is what you want to do or you don't. And then I was like, I'm not honestly sure this is what I want to do. So I decided to go to LCC instead after that first year. And then I went to...
There's water there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I went to Michigan. You know, part of the bad side about my job is that I talk all freaking day. There are days like, oh my gosh, there are days like where you literally are talking from 8:30 until 5:30 or whenever you can get the heck out of there. And I'm like, you know, I'm sick of even hearing my own voice. So,
and here you are talking right after work.
Yeah, exactly. So I decided to go to Michigan State. My dad and my brother had also gone to Michigan State. And so I did a criminal justice degree there and got a minor in women's studies and a specialty in juvenile delinquency. And I wanted to be a juvenile delinquent counselor. So that's what I went about doing after that. And I worked as a youth specialist for 4 years. And then
what is that?
Like, well, my first job.
Oh, youth specialist. Is that what you said?
Youth specialist,
oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. My first job was at Florence Crittenton, which is in Jackson. And it's a home for girls that were pregnant but were going to be sentenced to prison. So it was a prison alternative program.
Oh, okay.
But instead of being sentenced to prison, they were kind of given one last opportunity to complete this program, stay in this home, get educated, get some resources, do all these things that they had to do, like an intensive programming. But it was just for girls that were pregnant or already had children and were supposed to be going to prison.
Wow.
So that was my first job. when I was like,
That sounds intense as a first child.
it really was. There was a girl that I knew that I went to college with, and then later on we touched base, and she's the one that had told me about it, and I was a little bit shell-shocked at first, because I was sheltered growing up in Eaton Rapids on a farm with a strict dad, right? So,
Yeah.
and I was, in my early 20s then, and so, the girls really tried to take advantage of me at first.
I could imagine. I had a
I
friend.
had all kinds of crazy nicknames, as you can imagine.
I had a friend who worked at a youth home, or like I don't know if it's like a boys' home up in St. John's.
Yeah.
And he was saying that a lot of the different kids that you see, like essentially it's a prison or whatever. These are kids that have done terrible things, and it's like maybe a program to try to get them straightened out. I don't know. But he was saying that a lot of these stories, some of the things that these kids have seen or done, it's insane. Mm-hmm. Like you would not believe it.
Yeah.
Like some kids committing murder, like a 7-year-old, like things like that. Like I couldn't even imagine that.
I can't even imagine that.
No.
When it comes to a child, just hearing about that, you just can't even.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Like what does that do to a child? It's so sad.
Yeah.
So seeing some of these situations and some of these scenarios of these girls in this group home, I would imagine that gave you some compassion for when you did become a judge or even an attorney.
Yeah, it really did. And at that time, I hadn't even thought about going to law school. So I worked there, and then I went to the VFW home in Eaton Rapids, and I created this program called Independent Living, and it was for boys between the ages of 16 and 18, because at the VFW, at some point, you had to move out on your own. And these boys that were there, they didn't really have any skills to live independently. And so that's the whole premise of just kind of stealing that for the program, was like, it's an independent living program. What are you going to do when you're 18 and they just tell you have to leave here? How are you going to manage? How are you going to budget your money? Where are you going to work at? How are you going to live on your own?
Yeah.
So I ran a house with 6 boys between the ages of 16 and 18. So that was interesting. And we lived there. So I would live there for 4 days and 3 nights, and then the other girl that did it with me would flip. And so it was like literally your second home.
Wow. What was that like?
It was great, honestly.
Yeah.
It was great because you have a different dynamic, just like you can imagine when you spend that much time with anybody.
Yeah.
Let alone you share the same house.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to gain that trust, that level of communication, but then again, to be able to see them grow in certain ways. Or just, a couple funny stories, like I would do a money budget for your groceries. Like, we're going to go grocery shopping, and you're going to figure out, like, what are you going to buy for the week, to get by. And I had this one guy, all he bought was Tostino's frozen pizzas and Mountain Dew. Like, he calculated it out, and he would have so many pizzas and so many 2 liters of Mountain Dew, and that would be it for the week. And I'd be like, don't you want to try to? Nope. I like these. Okay. You just got to kind of help, guide somebody, but they'll figure it out on their own, or they won't.
Yeah.
And so the first time that we went to the grocery store and he decided to buy something else, it was such a small moment, but a big moment at the same time. Like, I'm going to try some fried chicken. Oh my God, yes. So it was a great experience. And I stayed there until I was pregnant with my first child. And then I left. And after I had my daughter, I stayed home for a little bit and just really wanted to be able to have that time. And then I decided to go to law school. So I studied and took the LSAT and ended up getting accepted into Cooley and went to Cooley Law School. And I went part-time. Interestingly enough, the day that I went to the doctor, this might be a little bit too personal, but I'm an open book, trust me.
You can say whatever you want.
I'm an open book. So I went to the doctor after having my daughter and got that follow-up appointment, right? And so I came home and got the mail, and in the mail was my letter of acceptance to Cooley Law School, and I was like, yes. And then within 5 minutes, my doctor's office called and said, you're pregnant again. I'm like,
Whoa.
what? Geez. So then when my husband came home, I said, I got 2 pieces of big news to tell you. So nobody could have thought like those 2 things were going to go together. But also as a woman, I think that people sometimes feel like, how are you going to manage that and be a mom? So sometimes people's initial response would be, oh, that's too bad. Maybe you won't be able to do that now. And I was like, what the? That's exactly why I'm going to do that. Like I was.
To help propel you.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So then I went to law school at night, and Cooley is really great for that. Like I really feel like that gave me a different opportunity because I would be home all day, and I would go to classes from 6 to 9. And on the weekend. So I'd take a couple classes during the week, and then I have classes on Saturday. And so it took me 4 years to get through law school doing it that way. But
that's really not that bad, though.
It's really not.
I mean, when you're raising a family, that's not bad at all.
Yeah. So like the last year, I was able to kind of speed it up a little bit and do an internship for the Attorney General's office. And
what was that like? What was that experience like?
At the Attorney General's office? It was great. It was great. Yeah. Well, my dad is also a lawyer.
Oh,
my dad has unfortunately passed away, but my dad was a lawyer. And the funny thing about that is that I was telling you earlier how strict he was, and we grew up on a farm. So I didn't realize that my dad was even a lawyer until I was a teenager, because when I came home from school, he was already in his farm clothes out there with the cattle and stuff like that.
So you thought he was doing that all day?
I thought he was a farmer. Yeah. He would be gone in the morning, but I didn't really think about that, when I got... But my dad went to Cooley as well. He was in the first graduating class in 1976.
Whoa. I feel that's one thing... I want to get your perspective on this, because you're a little older than I am.
Yes.
And you're a part of a different generation than I am. And one thing that I've noticed is that as the generations come and go, the newer generations don't seem as strict and as strong as some of the older generations, like your father's generation, because that's unheard of, right? People don't do that now. People don't work a full-time job and then go home and run a farm. You don't see that very often. I don't know anybody that does that.
Yeah.
Do you feel, or do you see any examples in your career, or people that come in and out of your courtroom of younger people who don't necessarily have the same, I don't know, the same work ethic or ability to have that kind of mindset?
Yeah. I think sometimes the younger generation thinks that things are supposed to happen easier.
Yeah.
Or that it's going to naturally happen. And that's not the case. You got to fight for everything. You got to work hard for everything. My dad used to say if it was easy, everybody would do it. It's not supposed to be easy. It's going to be hard.
Yeah.
If it's not hard, something's probably not right.
Yeah.
I tell people when they start probation, and I go through all the conditions, and I can start seeing their eyes roll back and get this weird look on their face like, what the? And I'm like, if you feel overwhelmed right now, that's good, because this is overwhelming. If you don't feel overwhelmed, you're not even paying attention or realizing what is going to be expected of you.
Yeah.
It is going to be hard, but you can still do it. You just got to realize what's in front of you, and that you're gonna set yourself up to success.
I mean, and that's one thing that with you going to night school on the weekends and in the evenings to become a lawyer or to go to law school. That's one of the most complicated things you could probably do in an educational pursuit. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Other than maybe being a doctor, that might be a little bit difficult because you're performing surgery or a surgeon or whatever. But that's got to be one of the most difficult things to do. And you were able to put yourself in that mindset of, okay, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it every week, every day, and I'm going to eventually achieve it. Yeah. But it takes hard work and dedication to get there.
Yeah. I mean, there are times where I didn't want to study after the kids went to bed because I was tired. Or there were times where I wanted to do other fun things, but
it's sacrifice.
You have to do that. And we didn't have a lot of money then. I wasn't working, so we had one income for a family of 4. And so it was hard. And I didn't have a set place to study. So I went down to the basement. But we had a Michigan basement. And so it was all rocks and dirt.
Oh.
Like, it wasn't really nice. So I remember there were times where I'd be sitting there and there would be like stuff from the wall or the ceiling that would just like the dirt would kind of fall down. I'd be like having to like push it off my books. And we had to run an extension cord from the kitchen, down to the basement because there wasn't separate electricity down there.
Oh my God.
So I could have a lamp. But
Wow.
I mean, if you want it, you're going to find a way to get it because there's nothing that's going to stop you if you want it.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it. So I do feel like, it's not going to be easy. And sometimes I don't like when people say the younger generation feels like they're entitled because that seems almost too extreme or a mischaracterization or stereotype that isn't necessarily on point for everybody.
I think it's not necessarily the young generation. I even think that maybe even people of your generation, it's the access to the things that we have. That's what makes everybody entitled. It's the ability to get on Amazon and order something today and get it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And if we can get it tomorrow, then we're like, why can't we get it tomorrow?
Yeah.
And I'll admit I'm guilty of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a sense of entitlement, even.
Yeah, I agree. I fight that with my own kids. My youngest child right now is 11. He's going into 7th grade next year in middle school. And so I can see the difference even between him and my second son. They are 12 years apart. So even the differences of the mentality, the technology, the things that are quicker, easier, and then having to deal with different stuff at school where I think being, the time frame when kids had to stay home from school kind of even changed. Like, no, it's not. School's not that easy.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be.
Right. It's not supposed to be that easy. Where you can do, your gym class from your living room.
Yeah.
Or
that's one thing that I think is concerning for schools. And I'm seeing it, with my kids because my daughter's in school. My wife has some older kids who are in school. And one of the things is they seem to make it easier for kids who have problems, which is cool. Like if a child has ADD or ADHD, which it seems like everybody has these days, they have some form of it. But they give them some sort of plan to where, schoolwork is easier. They don't have to work as hard. And then what I've noticed is that these kids take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. And they use it as almost a crutch to not have to do their homework or they get to leave class because they're stressed out and they get to go sit in a quiet room or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing, but I think it's good to help these kids, but I don't know if it's a good thing for them.
I think if it helps them like promote their ability to learn and to reach their education goals, because knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And you have to be educated. Yeah. Bottom line.
Absolutely.
But if it goes to the point where it extends over to their mentality of being accommodated and that's how the real world is going to also treat you, that's where the person is going to be disappointed later in life because that's not how it's going to happen for them.
Well, I mean, it takes discipline to want to pursue something harder, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, most kids, and I would be probably the first person to say that when I was a young person, I would very easily try to get out of things. If I don't have to do homework, why would I do homework?
Right, right.
If there was some sort of way for me to get out of, being in class, I probably would have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I went to Clue Law School, graduated.
I forgot we were.
I love how we just go off on different topics.
This happens all the time on the podcast,
okay,
so that's why I mean
good.
you don't have to be like
Yeah.
stressed or anything. We just talk.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, really, you could sign me up weekly, and we probably still wouldn't even get through everything. But so then after I graduated from law school, I started practicing. So then I practiced for 14 years. And so the short version is that one of the counties that I practiced in was Eaton County, and Judge Hoffman, who was one of 2 district court judges, because we only have 2 district court judges, decided he was going to retire. And he had been on the bench for 24 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, before I even started practicing. So once I became aware of that, and other people did, we didn't really get a lot of notice. I think at first I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. What this is going to be a change, what's going on. And then people started talking about, well, who's going to run for it? We realized it was open for election. And that hadn't happened in a while either. So
The election?
yeah, an election for a district court judge just because he'd been on the bench for 24 years.
So that doesn't happen very often where you run for judge?
Yeah, I mean it has to be open. It has to be open, or somebody has to contest you.
Oh, okay.
So
I see what you're saying.
Nobody had filed to get, like, your term is 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And nobody went against him.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And that's that's more common than not. So it just kind of depends, And so then people started talking about, who's gonna run for it, whatnot. And a friend of mine was thinking about it, and then he came to me and he said, I thought about it for a while. I talked to my wife about it. I don't think this is the right time for us. I'm not going to do it, but I think you should do it. And then that was the first time, honestly, I thought about it because I valued him and his opinion. And I was like, really? And he's like, well, yeah. And he started naming off all these reasons. And then I started thinking about it, and I thought, you know what? This might be my time, just because I feel like I'm prepared as far as the level of practice. I practice in state courts and federal courts. And I lived in the county my whole entire life. I felt really committed and dedicated to the county. And so I had been the magistrate for the county courthouse before as well. So I feel like I had really done everything, that this might be the time where I feel like I could actually give back, and I would be prepared and ready for that type of position. Then I also thought about, if I don't do it now, maybe I won't have another opportunity in my life. Maybe I'll regret that later. And I really feel like you have to take chances and opportunities when they're in front of you, because you just don't know what life is going to give you. And so then I decided to run. I had an opponent, but I won the election, thankfully. And so now it's been 5.5 years.
Why is it an elected position?
Because really you are there to serve the people. I think that is something that people don't emphasize enough, and people don't remember enough. As a judge, I serve the people. I serve the people of Eaton County. I'm there to serve them. So it's not necessarily about what I want. It's what the people decide. And even in my experiences as a practicing attorney, you would get the feel sometime from judges that they didn't have that mindset,
And that's a way to get them out.
And that's not okay, Or I've heard judges say, when they're looking at their schedule, we call it a docket, and they're like, well, this attorney's late, my docket this, my docket that. And then I always stop and say, it's not your docket. You're here to serve the people. When they're ready, you have to be ready. When they need you to help them with their issues, with their decisions, with their case, you're ready. It's not the other way around. You're there to serve the people. So
I like that. I think it's important to have people in power in positions like that who are there to support the people, because I think that's one thing that, like, a lot of people, and we see it in the media all the time with, like, police officers, right? Mm-hmm. Like, people, it's easy to do. It's an easy thing to do, like, if you're a police officer, to kind of get in the mindset of, like, okay, this is my job. I got to go to it every single day. And then people start looking at them as, like, they're othered. They're separate from us. They're not with us. They're essentially against us. And so I think it's important to see that whenever somebody goes into a courtroom, that they have somebody who, is obviously an authority, but they have control of the room and what happens, but they care. Mm-hmm. And like, I mean, at least I would think that's important. I've never been in any legal trouble like that, but
yeah,
I would want a judge who cared about my situation.
And even if you break it down, that you don't have to necessarily care about, Joe Smith personally, or care what happens to Joe Smith personally, but you have to care about the criminal justice system. You have to care about justice. You have to care about making sure each person is going to be heard. You have to care about making a decision under the law, because we don't make the law. We're charged with enforcing it. So you have to care about that. What is the law? How am I going to enforce it? You have to care about all that. And no one is going to have respect for the system if you don't have that level in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, no, justice should be number one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then after that, compassion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and you said you've been a judge for 5 years?
Yeah.
So it's every 5 or 6 years?
It's a 6-year term.
Okay.
So I'm in the middle of my 5th year. So like this term for me would end in December.
Okay.
So that's why I'm running for re-election, where the election will be in November.
Okay.
And if I win re-election, then the second 6-year term will start in January.
Okay.
So basically, like in your beginning of the 5th year, the Supreme Court sends you an email, thank God, and tells you, hey, this is the year that you have to decide if you want to run for another 6 years or not. And if you don't, you fill out a form saying, I'm deciding not to run for re-election. And if you do, and you're already a sitting judge, you fill out a form and say, I'm going to ask for another 6 years. And then you file that.
Okay.
So I did that back in January. And then the deadline for somebody to file against you is in April, like April 20-something or like towards the end of April. So somebody did file against me. And so now I'm campaigning or having to kind of step that up a little bit.
Yeah.
So because I do want to do another term, I do want to do another 6-year term, or I want to be able to stay on as judge, basically.
Yeah. So if that's not something that happens, what do you think you'll do?
I don't know.
I'm sure you're planning on being judge. So
I don't know.
Which is the better mindset to have. But
I never think in worst case scenario. I never think that way. Because then you're not going to be giving it your all, right? You can't go into a fight and doubt yourself.
Exactly.
You got to be ready.
Yeah.
You got to know what you want. Otherwise, why are you doing it? So I haven't thought about it at all. I really haven't. And so that's always kind of just been my mindset as well, too. I'm either all in or not. I'm not worrying about anything else.
That's cool. That's important because, I mean, I've interviewed a couple politicians and some of them they'll say like, well, if I win, like, no, you shouldn't say if, like you should say when I win. Like if when I win this is what I'll do or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a winner's mindset.
Yeah. I haven't thought about it any other way, honestly.
That's awesome.
Especially because when I ran the first time, I was a practicing attorney, right? So the rules are a little bit different about what you can do. You basically don't have any rules. That's the difference. Like you can, I looked at it as, I had a business, had my own practice, my own office building,
Wow.
And so I was doing all of that. I had other attorneys that were renting in my office building. It was on Washington and Lansing. And so when I decided to run, I could multitask the crap out of everything, because wherever you go, you could talk, you could do whatever,
Right.
and so you could be doing 6 things at once. You could be in your car driving to court, but talking on the phone, you could just do all of that 24/7 pretty much.
Yeah.
But when you're a judge, I didn't realize until I started this process, there's a lot of restrictions. Because I work for the people, right? So my salary is paid by the taxpayers.
Yeah.
It's actually set by the legislator, which I didn't realize until after I became judge. Somebody asked me, I remember when I was going door to door the first time, how much do judges make? And I said, I don't know. They're like, how come you don't know? And I'm like, I guess I never asked. I don't really know. And then later on, I thought, how do you even know how much a judge makes? And then I had to educate myself that it's the legislators that determine the salary of district court judges, circuit court judges, appellate court judges. Every level of judge has a different salary.
And is that different for every county?
No, it's statewide. So that there's no discrepancy. So if you're a judge in Wayne County, a district court judge in Wayne County, you make the same amount as me. We make the same.
Wow.
Like I went to judges school. When you get elected or you get appointed, you go to judges school. The Supreme Court puts it on. And I sat next to a guy who was a Wayne County district court judge. And he was telling me about his caseload and what he has to do. And I was telling him about mine. And he never heard of Eaton County before or anything. And so he's like, wait. I get paid the same amount that you get paid, but I have to do, this. And I'm like, I don't know what. But
Sounds like you need a new job, sir.
Yeah. These are things that people don't think about or realize, right? But it also seems like it would be more fair so that all judges, regardless of where you're at, make the same. And so the salary is set by the legislator. It's taxpayer dollars. You work for the people for that reason. And so when you're sitting as a judge, you get part of your salary comes from the state through the legislator. Another part comes from the county that you're sitting in. So it's kind of like the county is paying because they have a sitting judge, and then so they split your salary in that regard, right?
Okay.
So where was I going with that? Oh,
you're talking about working for the people.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So because of that, you are on task as the judge being paid, and so you can't multitask.
Right.
You can't really do anything during the day at all. Like sometimes during my lunch hour, I'll get on and do some stuff, or if I'm going to be able to leave work early, or I'm using vacation time and stuff, but it's totally different.
Yeah.
It's totally different. So that is a kind of a different challenge. And then also too, sometimes people don't realize that you have restrictions. So people will just start talking to me or coming up, saying stuff, and I have to be like, oh, I can't really talk to you about that right now. Or, you have to act like nothing is happening because you have a completely different role.
Yeah, it's almost a conflict of interest. You can't promote on company time.
Yes, that's a better, shorter way of saying that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess if I was an employer of like just a regular business, I wouldn't want somebody promoting their business while they're working for me. Mm-hmm. Same concept, I guess.
Yeah.
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 One thing I wanted to ask you was that because you deal with like a lot of criminal law and all that, have you ever been concerned about public safety, like your safety, like going out in the general public or anything like that, or your kids' safety or anything like that?
I have not.
No.
I have not. And one of the most common questions that I do get too, besides, what's the hardest part of your job is, do you ever get threatened or has anything bad ever happened? And I can honestly say I have never had a bad experience.
Wow.
I'll give you two quick stories though. One is apparently there was a guy who was in jail, and when he would come to court in front of a different judge, he would just act a fool, act out. He would start cussing and just being hostile. And he would tell the judge, I'm going to kill you. Ooh. And just, got to the point where that judge is like, I don't feel comfortable handling the case. Because if it gets in your head so much that you feel like it's going to affect your ability to make an impartial decision, you have an obligation to tell somebody about it and get yourself removed from the case. You can recuse yourself.
Right.
So that judge, I guess, decided to do that. And so then the case just went back in to be assigned, and it got assigned to me. So the corrections, the sheriff's department has 2 deputies that work in the courthouse that bring people in and out of jail. They had said something to me about it, like, you're going to have this guy who blah, 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 what I just said. And so I was like, okay, whatever. So I got done with the day, and we were talking, and I said, I thought I was supposed to have that guy. And they're like, yeah, he already came in today. And I was like,
which one?
I didn't even know who it was. And so then they described, like, we had to go back, like, well, what did he look like? What was his case about? Then I knew who they were, because I have a hard time remembering every person's name. But if you tell me a fact about your case, or I see your face, I'll never forget a face.
Yeah.
Even I say to people, like, I'm telling you this to your face, and if I see your face again, this is what I'm going to remember. Like, whoa. I never forget a face.
That's scary when a judge says that. If I see your face in here again.
It sounds so dramatic. Like, even people who come in, when we were talking before about, bond violations or probation violations, if I told you, this is why I also hated Zoom, because you don't have that face-to-face, right?
Yeah.
If I told you to your face, and I feel like I explain stuff in detail, kind of overboard a little bit, because I want to make sure you understand.
Yeah, that's important for your job.
Yeah, and sometimes you're nervous, you just want to get the heck out of there, but I really need to feel comfortable that you understand what's happening and what could happen next.
Yeah.
And so if I go through it in detail with you, which I really try to do, and then I say, do you understand do you have any questions? And we go through it, and then it comes up later. I will tell the person, I told you to your face, like, this is what, and they'll be like, yeah. Like, you really don't have anything to say at that point.
Yeah. And I gave you a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But, where was I going with that again?
We're talking about safety.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So they were telling me about the guy and the facts, which is where I was saying, like, I remember the facts in the person's face. And after they explained that, I was like, oh yeah, well, that guy was totally fine. He said, thank you.
Whoa.
They're like, yeah, we couldn't believe it. We were talking about it afterwards. So, and I always joke sometimes too that, as long as you're respectful to somebody, they're going to return that.
Yeah.
And even if they don't like the decision, sometimes it's even surprising to me. People will say, thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that brings me back to when I went to probate court, and, I didn't obviously like the ruling of the judge, whatever the judge ruled. I didn't like it. It wasn't in my favor. But I do understand that there's a law and that he was doing the best that he could with the situation that he was given. Mm-hmm. And so not once did I ever think like, oh, that judge is a terrible judge, or, like, he seemed more than fair. In fact, he even said, I wish I could rule in your favor, but he couldn't.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of bound.
Yeah. And that makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Where you
absolutely.
feel like that at least the information was gathered, it was considered, you were heard.
Yeah.
An analysis was done of the law.
Yeah.
Whether you agreed with it or not.
Yeah. Not everything always goes your way.
Yeah.
Even if you're a good person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I had a judge tell me once that if you make a decision and nobody's happy, that's a good decision. Because somebody's always going to be unhappy, right?
That is very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially it's an adversarial system people forget about for a reason.
Yeah.
So if I have a prosecutor and a defense attorney in my courtroom, they're both arguing. Guaranteed they're arguing for different things. Guaranteed sometimes it's miles apart.
Yeah.
You could have somebody saying, my client should get a PR bond. This person should go to jail with no bond. Like, it could be that extreme, no matter what you decide, usually somebody is going to be unhappy about something.
I mean, do you think they just kind of start like at the extreme and then they hope to come somewhere in the middle, that you decide something in the middle for them?
Sometimes I do wonder that.
Yeah.
Or I would like to ask attorneys that, but it would be improper for me to do that. But sometimes, you always had those like $1 million questions where you're like, I wonder. Or sometimes when I think I can read between the lines, but they're not saying that directly, that I want to ask, were you really trying to say this? Like, is this a message you were trying to send, but you didn't come out and say that? Or what was the true, fact behind that? Did you really know this, or but I can never know. Like, I have more questions than answers a lot of times. And that's frustrating too, honestly, because there are things that I want to know, but I can only make a decision on what's provided to me.
Yeah. And it's not like you can just ask it like it's an open discussion.
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, let's be real. Tell me what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that would be very difficult. Mm-hmm. Your job would be very difficult. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine that you would want to do it again. But more power to you. I'm happy that you're running, and I wish you the best. Is there anything else? We've been going for over an hour.
Have we really?
We have.
God, well, first of all, you're super easy to talk to.
I try to be.
You ask great questions.
Well, thank you.
You're also really helpful in trying to, not just keep the conversation topic going, but also coming back to things.
Yeah, I try to be.
It's been really, honestly, just a pleasure and really easy to talk to you. So
awesome. Well, thank you. Mm-hmm. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast, and thank you so much for doing this. I wish you the best. When is the election?
I don't have a primary because I have one opponent.
Okay.
If there was more than one opponent.
Who's the opponent?
His name is Ryan Tetloff. He's an assistant prosecutor.
Okay.
He's been with the prosecutor's office for a little over 7 years, and he decided to file close to the deadline, like the last day of the deadline. And so then I found out about it from somebody else. So I feel like It hasn't really come up, but I feel like people may ask me why, and I really don't know, because he didn't come and talk to me about it beforehand. Maybe that's an old school kind of thing, but I just feel like that would be, respectable, or,
Yeah. Hey, we're going to be running against each other.
Yeah. Or just so I like to think of it as, this may sound like overconfident. I don't mean to sound this way at all, but I like to feel like maybe I'm making it seem too easy. Like the job is too easy or too great.
That could be the case. They could be like, I could do that.
Right. Yeah. I think I want to do that now. But so I really don't know. So since it's just one opponent that I have, we don't have a primary. So go all the way to November. And so
that's a long time.
I'll be on the November ballot. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, get out and vote. And this is your judge here in Eaton County.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.